Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Lewis McGlynn.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Saoirse Healy.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Donald C. Stewart. Broadcasting Scotland is Scotland's independent broadcaster, providing factual news, reporting on the issues important to the people of Scotland.
We are committed to public service broadcasting, and with your support, we will produce even more programmes.
Provide opportunities for young people interested in media production and broadcasting, and challenge preconceptions of what Scottish media looks like, amplifying Scotland's voice and reflecting its communities.
We can already deliver high-quality live news, and we will create the highest quality programmes for you to enjoy. But we can only do that with your support.
So please subscribe to and share our channel or donate to Broadcasting Scotland via the link in the description. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. The first item of business is general questions, our shortest question session of the week, colleagues. And at question number 1, I call Michelle Thomson.
To ask the Scottish Government, in light of the demand for neurodevelopmental assessments and treatment for children and adults, what its assessment is of the recommendations by the Royal College of Psychiatrists in Scotland, such as its 4-tiered service model for assessment and intervention.
Minister Marie Todd.
The Scottish Government welcomes the Royal College of Psychiatrists report on meeting the needs of autistic people and people with ADHD in Scotland. We agree with the College that the demand for neurodevelopmental assessment and support now exceeds what Scotland's current mental health infrastructure can deliver, and that different response is needed. We're taking time to consider their report fully, including whether a stepped care model could be considered for neurodevelopmental assessment. We're also driving forward our improvement work, including the establishment of our Children and Young People's Neurodevelopmental Task Force and our ongoing work with National Autism Implementation Team, NATE.
Michelle Thomson.
I thank the Minister for that response, and as the Minister will be aware from my correspondence and indeed our discussions, the rising pressure and demand is an acute issue which is also impacting many individuals in my Falkirk East constituency. And I know the Scottish Government's Director of Mental Health wrote to all the health boards to seek clarification on what assessment and support they currently have in place because of the diversity across different areas. And also the local protocols are different. But I wondered, has there been any findings from these letters that have gone out, and if she's able to give us any further information about what they are?
Minister.
I can confirm that we've now received responses from all of the health boards. We're considering the findings in more detail and what next steps should be taken. The information isn't yet publicly available, so there's no findings to share at this time, but I do absolutely recognise the member's long interest in this area on behalf of her constituents, and I'll ask the Minister, Tom Arthur, to ensure that he shares the findings with her and with broader Parliament when they're available.
Brief supplementary, Pam Duncan-Clancy.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Parents and adults who are not parents in the Glasgow region are approaching me really worried about access to ADHD assessments for adults. They've been waiting for a long time for any pathway for support, and some of them are struggling to continue with work and other responsibilities. What reassurance can the Minister give that pathways will be available for people in the Glasgow region to access adult ADHD assessments?
Minister.
So I recognise the concern that is caused. Long waits for support are unacceptable, and we're absolutely committed to improving timely access to support, to diagnosis and to support for autistic people and people with ADHD. In July, we announced the reopening of our £2.5 million multi-year Autistic Adult Support Fund. That fund supports third sector organisations which help autistic adults to reach their full potential, supporting them, their families and their carers to understand what neurodivergence means for them and to improve their well-being.
Question number 2, Rachael Hamilton.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what legislative action it plans taking in the remainder of this parliamentary session to protect farmers from the threat of rural crime.
Minister Siobhan Brown.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Rural crime is a serious issue affecting individuals, communities and businesses, and the Scottish Government fully supports efforts to tackle it. The Scottish Partnership Against Rural Crime, SPARC, chaired by Police Scotland, brings together key justice and rural sector partners to provide a robust multi-agency approach to preventing rural crime and support actions taken at a local level. The member will be aware of the legislative programme for the rest of the term and the short time that we have left. There is no plans for rural crime legislation in what remains of this session.
Rachael Hamilton.
I'd like to thank the Minister for her answer. Following a meeting in June, the Minister agreed to write to the Home Office, and the letter highlighted that the Scottish Government missed an opportunity to introduce an LCM in June of 2022, which would have allowed for further safeguards and deterrents to stop rural crime. Since the LCM was missed, rural crime has cost Scottish farmers and rural businesses nearly £5 million, and the letter states that my constituency of Ettrick Rothes, Berwickshire, is a rural crime hotspot. So I want to say also that Police Scotland and the National Crime Unit also wanted to see regulations introduced last summer. So will the Minister, despite her answer, bring forward an expedited bill and work with me to tackle rural crime before the end of this Parliament?
Minister.
Thank you, and I thank the member for her continued interest in equipment theft and serious issue affecting rural businesses. Just for clarity, the LCM and the legislation and that Act has not come into effect yet in England and Wales. As the member is aware and alluded to in her question, I wrote to the UK Government earlier this year regarding the process of the implementation of the Act, and they recently published a summary evidence responses ahead of planned regulations being brought forward. This is an important step towards the Act being into effect in England and Wales. I would reiterate my willingness to work with the member on legislative options, but it would not be in this parliamentary term.
Brief supplementary, Christine Graham.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. As the member knows, my constituency is adjacent to hers, and for a former lawyer, I'm not too hot on legislation. It's not always the answer. So can I refer the Minister to the recently published 3-year policy by Police Scotland in collaboration with SPARC, which is focusing on such things as prevention of agricultural machinery using technology, and they've also now 100 specially trained officers. I hope the Minister agrees with me, that might be more effective than legislation. Action, not legislation.
Minister.
Thank you, and I think there's some great work doing there. I know that the 3-year strategy for SPARC was published in June, and it's the first time it adopts the 4 Ps model of prevent, pursue, protect and prepare. The refreshed strategy includes a number of actions around how perpetrators will be brought to justice, how rural communities can safeguard against such crimes, and how individuals can be diverted from being involved with them. Part of the work of SPARC also involves working with other forces in the UK to disrupt the activity criminals can travel across our border.
Question number 3, Ruth Maguire.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government when the Children's Scotland Act 2020 will be fully implemented.
Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. While some sections of the Act have already commenced, there are some areas of this wide-ranging Act that are outstanding, but we remain committed to commence. I'm providing updates to the Equalities, Human Rights and Civil Justice Committee on implementation, and I updated them most recently on the 26th of September. 2 SSIs on the regulation of child contact services were approved by the Parliament earlier this month and will be implemented on the 1st of April 2027, and a further set of commencement regulations is planned relating to hearing the child's views, additional factors for the court to consider and delay in contact and resident cases.
Ruth Maguire.
I thank the Minister for that answer. I think Parliament voted for that Act with great hopes that it would centre children in child contact cases and address some real difficulties that we'd heard about. I'm still receiving casework from women where children who have witnessed their father terrorise their mother, both physically and emotionally, are being forced by courts to have contact with their father, despite restraining orders and things being in place. Is the Minister confident that when this legislation is fully enacted, it will address this disaster, or are there more actions that need to be taken to ensure that the judiciary do truly put children's well-being at the heart of decisions they're making around contact?
Minister.
Thank you. Ensuring the child's best interest is central in any contact case, and that was a key aim of the 2020 Act. And I believe implementation will bring big improvements for children in the cases that Ms Maguire referred to. For example, enhancing how their views are heard, ensuring child welfare reporters who can be appointed to the child's views are properly trained and also in understanding domestic abuse. The regulation of child contact services will help ensure centres are safe, conflict-free places for children, and we are also progressing wider work to improve how the civil and the criminal courts interact, including how the civil courts get information on domestic abuse.
Question number 4, Maggie Chapman.
To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to support tenants and owner-occupiers affected by RAC in the North East Scotland region.
Cabinet Secretary Mary McKellen.
This is a worrying time, Presiding Officer, for those whose homes are affected by RAC. I have met with residents in Aberdeen, in Dundee, Angus and Clackmannanshire just yesterday to discuss the challenges that they face. We are working with local authorities who are responsible for finding local solutions. For example, I recently agreed to Aberdeen's request for flexibility in an existing housing infrastructure fund commitment. This is allowing the council to provide additional support for residents from within their own budget. I have repeatedly pressed the UK Government for a central dedicated RAC remediation fund. They have failed to provide that thus far. In the meantime, I'll continue considering requests for flexibility in existing budgets.
Maggie Chapman.
Last month, Aberdeen Council told Tory homeowners that they would be offered the full value of their homes before RAC was discovered, given the £10 million fund made available by the Scottish Government. And yet, for the worst affected city, Dundee, there is still no RAC fund. Homeowners in Dundee and Angus are wondering why they are still waiting for information and support. When will the Cabinet Secretary announce support for RAC-affected homeowners who are facing financial ruin in more ways than one in Dundee and Angus?
Cabinet Secretary.
I have to be very clear, Presiding Officer, that the arrangements reached with Aberdeen City Council were very bespoke to Aberdeen. As I said in my initial answer, they were about offering flexibility in honouring an existing housing infrastructure fund that hadn't been drawn down. And indeed, that itself wasn't doable, and we ended up offering flexibility with the Affordable Home Supply Programme, which allowed the Council to create headroom elsewhere. A very specific response to a very Aberdeen-specific case, but as I said in my opening remarks, I will consider requests for flexibility within existing budgets from any council with RAC-affected residents.
Supplementary, Liam Kerr.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. RAC homeowners in Aberdeen's Torry who've already sold their homes at an undervalue fear paying tax on the compensation and losing benefits. This would pile yet more injustice on what has been a nightmare for years. Will the Cabinet Secretary instruct officials to help Aberdeen City Council prevent this coming to pass?
Cabinet Secretary.
These are entirely matters for Aberdeen City Council to work through with the residents of Torry, and I would encourage them to do so.
Question number 5, Elena Whittam.
Government whether it will provide an update on the work it has been doing regarding people obtaining in-person GP appointments.
Cabinet Secretary Neil Gray.
Presiding Officer, the latest published data, Public Health Scotland's general practice in hours activity visualisation, shows that as of September, as many as 81% of appointments with GPs and other clinicians in general practice were physical. This is not as high as the proportion pre-pandemic, where approximately 87% of appointments were physical, but we would always have expected the overall proportion of physical appointments to reduce reduce as options for virtual appointments become more available. My predecessor, Hamza Youssef, wrote to GPs in 2022 advising that de-escalation of infection prevention control measures gave them much greater latitude to see patients in person. This, alongside our record funding increase for core GP services and for walk-in clinics, should continue to improve access to one of the critical primary care front doors of our NHS.
Elena Whittam.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his answer. In my constituency, access to general practice remains a concern, particularly in rural communities. This does vary between practices, but I am being contacted by constituents about this matter on a regular basis. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree that investment must be matched by concerted, targeted support for recruitment and retention to ensure sustainable care across all parts of Scotland, including in Carrick, Cumnock and Doon Valley?
Cabinet Secretary.
Yes, I do absolutely agree with Elena Whittam. A core element of the record funding increase for general practice is contingent upon increased employment of general practitioners and wider practice staff. And alongside that, through our GP recruitment and retention 20-point action plan, we're taking substantive steps to support practices in rural areas. Our £10,000 Golden Hello scheme incentivises GPs to take up rural positions. The Early Career GP Fellowship is reaching new rural areas thanks to our investment this year, now across 7 health boards. Our graduate entry medical programme, ScotGem, focuses on rural medicine and healthcare improvement, and we continue to fund Rediscover the Joy, supporting rural and island practices with short-term GP cover.
Question 6, Sharon Dowie.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to reduce the number of repeat shoplifting offenders in light of reports that 10 individuals have accumulated over 1,500 charges in the last 4 years.
Minister Siobhan Brown.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Scottish Government recognises the harm caused by retail crime, and our budget for 25 to 26 has made an additional £3 million available to help tackle the issue as part of our record investment in policing. Police Scotland has used this funding to establish a retail crime task force which aims to prevent such incidents and pursue those responsible. Police Scotland's plan also includes specific actions to target repeat offenders by using analytical data and intelligence to carry out proactive enforcement activities in areas most heavily impacted. Investment is also being used to develop diversionary programmes aimed at reducing reoffending.
Sharon Dowie.
Thank the Minister for that answer. Retailers Against Crime and other industry partners have been clear that intelligence sharing is essential to identify repeat and organised offenders. Given that Police Scotland's Retail Crime Task Force has, in its first 6 months, supported the detection of more than 500 retail offences, will the Minister commit to extending and increasing that funding beyond March 2026 to help tackle prolific shoplifters?
Minister.
Thank you. I know discussions are ongoing with Police Scotland about their budgetary requirements, and I hope the member will appreciate that I will not be making any budgetary announcements in general questions today, but the Cabinet Secretary for Finance has confirmed the Scottish budget will be published on Tuesday the 13th of January 2026.
Question number 7, Alec Rowley.
Presiding Officer, to ask the Scottish Government what action it's taking to address waiting times for gynecological diagnostic procedures in NHS 5.
Minister Jenny Minto.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. This year we've allocated an additional £135.5 million to health boards to tackle the longest waits. This includes an allocation of over £1.1 million to NHS 5 for gynecological support, extra full-day theatre lists and full-day new outpatient clinics. I understand from NHS 5 that they are currently on track to deliver no patient waiting over 52 weeks by our 31st of March 2026 target. Beyond this, we are working with the Centre for Sustainable Delivery to ensure all boards are a sustainable solution for the future.
Alec Rowley.
Presiding Officer, I've been contacted by a constituent, a 23-year-old woman, who has been advised that she may face a wait of over a year for a keyhole surgery that is needed to diagnose the source of an ongoing severe pelvic pain. Over the last year, the constituent has experienced 2 miscarriages, recurrent pelvic infections, as well as the severe pelvic pain significantly impacting on her quality of life. I have raised this directly with NHS 5, but I would be grateful if the Minister would have a look at this case. I'll pass it over, because it's fine to say 52 weeks, but if in the case of this constituent, it really is not acceptable.
Minister.
I thank Alec Rowley for his follow-up question, and he's absolutely right. That length of wait is not sustainable. It's not good for women's health, which is why we have invested the funding. I'm very happy to follow up with him after the questions.
Question number 8, Douglas Ross.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will commit to providing full details of why each of the 3,537 or 47% of the total applications to the Future Farming Investment Scheme were deemed ineligible, including whether ministers raised any concerns when presented with this figure.
Minister Jim Fairley.
Presiding Officer, as a matter of routine, the Scottish Government does not provide individual responses to agricultural grant applications to explain why an individual grant application was unsuccessful. A breakdown of the broad category of reasons for the applications which were not taken forward will be published shortly, and I will write to the member concerned to provide the information around that scoring criteria. Scottish ministers were made aware of the scoring criteria, the numbers of successful and unsuccessful applications and the overall value of support offered. But ministers do not routinely become involved in the day-to-day scheme management issues.
Douglas Ross.
I'm sorry, that's just not good enough, Minister. Surely routinely 50% of applications are not deemed ineligible. Something has gone badly wrong here, and it looks like the Minister was asleep at the wheel and didn't even ask any questions. So given the numbers involved here, given that almost 50% were deemed ineligible, and many people are questioning why, is there not a duty on this Government to tell each and every one of them why they were deemed ineligible, what went wrong, and sort it out?
Through the Chair always, Minister.
So, Presiding Officer, the scheme was co-designed with the industry, including the NHS, the National...
Let's hear the Minister.
The scheme was designed with the industry, including the National Farmers Union of Scotland. It was designed to help eligible active farmers and crofters to improve environmental performance of their businesses in terms of climate change biodiversity benefits. Applications were assessed through a standardised framework that cross-checked application data against single application form and other system-held data to ensure consistency, transparency and audit defensibility. The scoring model was looking for core objectives, 6 core objectives: business efficiency, business sustainability, environmental protection, greenhouse gas reduction, climate adaptation and public good. The priority groups that the member talks about, priority status did not alone guarantee funding investments. It also had to demonstrate strong alignment with the scheme objectives and deliver measurable outcomes.
Thank you. That concludes general questions. The next item of business is First Minister's questions, and I call Russell Finlay at question number 1.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. In 1998, aged 25, I spent 3 glorious weeks at France 98. There was no Google, no smartphones, no social media, no Scottish Parliament. But as our English friends say, it's been almost 30 years of hurt, but we never stopped dreaming. And on behalf of the Scottish Conservatives and the Tartan Army, I want to congratulate and to thank our Scotland heroes. Now, turning to my questions to the First Minister, hundreds of Scottish jobs are at risk, this time in Fife. Thousands have already been lost. Grangemouth, 400 jobs. Harbour Energy, 250. Hunting plc, 200. Apache, 500. Petrofac, 2,000. Now Mossmoran, 400 more jobs. Scotland's oil and gas industry is being destroyed before our eyes. The Labour and SNP governments are causing this to happen because it suits their net zero agenda. John Swinney's government promised a Mossmoran transition plan 18 months ago. So where is it?
First Minister.
President Officer, let me begin by expressing my warmest congratulations to the Scotland team, to Steve Clark and the squad. It was an absolute privilege to be present at Hampden Park on Tuesday night to see such an exciting game of football with spectacular goals. And the Scotland national team have brought joy to everyone in Scotland, and I pay warm tribute to them for what they achieved on Tuesday. President Officer, Russell Finlay raises important issues about the future of employment in Scotland, and the Government will do everything we can to work to support the workforce at ExxonMobil about the challenges that are now faced as a consequence of the decision in connection with the Mossmoran plant. It is absolutely vital that we take forward measures to ensure a just transition, which means that we must manage the issues that we confront in relation to the future of the North Sea oil and gas sector and its implication for other communities. The Government signalled on Tuesday our determination to use the learning that has come from the work that we're undertaking on Grangemouth to be applied in the situation in Mossmoran to provide every support that we can to the employees who are facing a very difficult future as a consequence of the announcement on Tuesday.
Russell Finlay.
So where's the Mossmoran transition plan that was promised? The reason he didn't produce one is because John Swinney instead fixates on net zero policies that will hit Scots in the pocket, like fining householders £15,000 if they don't get rid of their gas boilers. Scotland's oil and gas infrastructure is being decimated because of government policies. Now, last week, alongside Kemi Badenoch, I held a round table with leading oil and gas industry figures. They all say the most damaging policy risking jobs is the Energy Profits Levy. Their number one ask of Labour's budget next week is that it should be scrapped. And today I'm writing to Rachael Reeves, urging her to axe the EPL. And I'd like to ask if John Swinney would add his name to my letter.
First Minister.
I think for completeness I should point out to Parliament that the Energy Profits Levy was introduced by the Conservative government in the first place.
Thank you. Thank you.
And it was extended by the Conservative government. So
let's hear one another.
The issues around the Energy Profits Levy are now very acute in relation to the oil and gas sector. And I don't need to add my name to the letter that Russell Finlay is talking about, because the Finance Secretary has already made these representations to the United Kingdom Government. And we are at a pivotal moment in relation to supporting the sustaining of employment in Scotland's economy as we ensure that we build up towards our clean energy and renewable future. And this requires the UK Government to heed the concerns that have been expressed by many people, including the Scottish Government, about the continuation of the Energy Profits Levy that was introduced by the Conservatives.
Russell Finlay.
The EPL must go and both governments must change direction. And if they don't, industry body Offshore Energies UK warns that 1,000 jobs will be lost every month until 2030. That's 1,000 jobs every single month. This is a national emergency. The Fraser of Allender Institute today released a new report which warns that, and I quote, jobs, tax revenues and regional economies are at risk. It says that skilled workers are either leaving the country or the industry altogether, and it estimates the cost to our economy could reach £13 billion. Unless Labour and the SNP change course, Scotland's world-leading oil and gas sector will be wiped out entirely, never to return. Does John Swinney at least accept that his government's hostility to oil and gas has contributed to this national emergency?
First Minister.
President, what the Scottish Government has done has been to put in place practical support to assist the communities that will inevitably be affected by the transition to net zero, particularly as the North Sea oil and gas sector reduces, because it is a mature basin, and that is a geological factor that we have to come to terms with. Now, we have set up, for example, the Oil and Gas Transition Training Fund, which is supporting eligible workers with funding for training to build the skills required for the sustainable energy approaches of the future. We've also put in place the North East and Moray Transition Fund, which is about putting in place practical financial support to assist in that transition. And indeed, I was privileged to be part of the new Skills Hub opening, which took place in Aberdeen just a few weeks ago. So the Government will take forward sustained support to assist in the management of the transition, which I recognise to be a significant threat to companies and to employees, but the Scottish Government will do all that we can to support workers. I appeal to the United Kingdom Government to take sympathetic policy decisions that will help in that respect as well.
Absolutely. So Finlay.
It's just an invasive insult to the oil and gas workers. He's offering a sticking plaster to a shotgun wound. The SNP opposes Rosebank. They oppose Cambo. They oppose Jackdaw. They support a ban on any new North Sea development. John Swinney could change this now, so why doesn't he? Well, he's worried that extremists in his own party and the Greens would unite and he would lose a vote in this Parliament. So let me make him another offer today. My party will support his government to overturn its presumption against new developments. We will give him the votes to protect thousands of Scottish jobs. So is John Swinney prepared to do the right thing?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government's position is that any new oil and gas developments have got to pass a climate compatibility assessment to ensure that they are consistent with the agenda that we have got to take forward on net zero. That is the position of the Scottish Government, and indeed what has happened in judgments been made by courts in the United Kingdom has essentially reinforced that position and the necessity which the United Kingdom Government is now having to do to consider developments in that context. So that is the position of the Scottish Government. And what we will set out, what we've done, what we're delivering as practical assistance is the measures to support new business ventures in Grangemouth, the transition funds that we have available in the north east of Scotland, a recognition that government has got to be an active player in protecting industry and protecting employees, and that's exactly what the Scottish Government will do.
Question number 2, Anna Sarwar.
Presiding Officer, can I join others, first of all, in congratulating Steve Clark and the Scotland men's team for qualifying for the World Cup. They have done the entire nation proud. I actually remember rushing home from school to watch the Scotland-Brazil game in 1998 and the absolute jubilation when John Collins scored that penalty against Brazil, only for the goal that followed. But anyway, we enjoyed John Collins scoring that goal. And honestly, I am so proud that my kids are going to get to experience Scotland at a World Cup and cheer that on and develop their own memories for generations to come. Presiding Officer, later today, the COVID inquiry report on political decision-making will be published. COVID-19 shook all our lives, with thousands of lives lost in Scotland. The UK COVID inquiry is vital, so we can learn lessons, acknowledge mistakes and give answers to mourning families. Given that John Swinney was central to the operations of the Scottish Government before, during and after the pandemic, does he regret deliberately deleting evidence for the inquiry, frustrating its process, and will he take this opportunity to apologise?
First Minister.
COVID-19 was an incredibly difficult period for everyone, and I express today my heartfelt sympathies to everyone who lost a loved one during the pandemic, and also to those who suffered a tremendous level of disruption to their lives. Ministers acted at all times based on the best information that was available to them at the time, and I have set out to the COVID inquiry the basis of decision-making in which I was involved and which the Scottish Government took incredibly seriously to ensure that we took the necessary action to protect the population where there was no guidebook about what we were dealing with in relation to COVID-19. We supported establishing a public inquiry so that all governments can learn the necessary lessons for the future, and that's exactly what the Scottish Government will do. And in all of the actions I took in relation to information, I took those actions consistent with Scottish Government policy.
Anna Sarwar.
Presiding Officer, John Swinney was the Deputy First Minister who deliberately deleted evidence shameful and unforgivable. He was the Education Secretary who shamefully downgraded the exam results of working-class kids, and he was a COVID Recovery Secretary that failed to deliver any recovery. But the most devastating decision made by ministers was to send COVID-positive and untested patients into care homes, even when it was known that older people were the most vulnerable to the virus. Over 100 COVID-positive patients were sent into care homes. Over 3,000 untested patients were sent into care homes. And the devastating consequence was over 4,000 people died with COVID in care homes. And this is now being investigated by the police. You don't need clinical advice to know that sending people with the virus to live with the people most vulnerable to the virus would lead to deaths. So will John Swinney apologise for this disastrous and catastrophic decision?
First Minister.
Sir, as I indicated in my first answer, the ministers at the time were dealing with an evolving situation in which advice was being formulated by scientific experts at the time, clinical experts assessing the right judgments to be made in dealing with an emerging and fast-changing situation. And ministers at that time were open with Parliament about the dilemmas and the challenges that were involved. And those decisions were subjected to scrutiny by Parliament at the time, and they are, of course, being subjected to scrutiny by the COVID-19 inquiry. Now, I have been very clear that I regret the suffering that individuals experienced during the period of COVID. It did enormous damage to people. People lost loved ones. It did enormous damage to our society, and we are still dealing with the consequences of COVID. So I understand the scale of the impact and the damage that was done, and obviously, as I've indicated, the Government will listen carefully to the inquiry and respond accordingly to the recommendations that are made by the inquiry as we seek to learn lessons from what was a traumatic period in the country's history.
Anna Sarwar.
You do not need clinical advice to know you don't send COVID-positive patients into care homes. Actually, right across the country, people have the common sense not to go visit their granny when they've got a cold, never mind putting COVID-positive patients into care homes. John Swinney was the Minister for COVID Recovery, and this was supposed to be the COVID Recovery Parliament. But look at where we are. At the start of this Parliament, there were 16,798 Scots waiting 4 hours in A&E in 1 month. Now it is 45,639. At the start of this Parliament, there were 1,810 waiting for 8 hours. Now it is 15,821. At the start of this Parliament, there were 96,053 waiting for inpatient treatment. Now it is 155,849. And at the start of this Parliament, there were 391,938 waiting for an outpatient appointment. Now it is 559,077. John Swinney promised recovery and he delivered catastrophe, a shameful record and one he can't delete. So isn't it clear that we can't afford another 5 years of this, and what Scotland needs is to recover from John Swinney and the SNP?
First Minister.
One of the many flaws in the argument that Mr Sarwar has just put to me is that he's comparing this moment today with the start of this parliamentary term. In the start of this parliamentary term, the country was still dealing with COVID. We were still in the midst of COVID. We still had the pause for at least a year beyond the start of this Parliament on routine scheduled cases because of the priority to sustain the National Health Service during that period. So the idea that Mr Sarwar is comparing like with like ignores, as he always does, the reality of the COVID pandemic and its significant disruption. Now, what I can reassure Mr Sarwar about is that under my leadership, the scale and activity of the National Health Service is increasing to tackle those very issues. We had more than 10,000 extra outpatient attendances for September compared to August. Activity in our National Health Service has increased, with more than 31,000 extra appointments and procedures from April to September compared to the same period in 2024. We are now seeing the total list size and the longest waits coming down. We are also treating more people, with activity increasing significantly compared to last month and last year. So the action that Mr Sarwar is calling for of increased NHS activity, increased procedures, increased solutions for the people of Scotland is happening, and it's happening under my leadership, and it's going to carry on happening under my leadership, because I'm determined to support our population to recover from COVID.
Question number 3, Ross Greer.
Thank you, and like the First Minister and colleagues, can I start by congratulating Steve Clarke and the national team. I can't remember 1998, so like many other people across Scotland, I'm looking forward to, for the first time, to experience having our national team compete in a World Cup. Now, on Tuesday, workers at ExxonMobil's Mossmorran site were locked out of their workplace and told that they would lose their jobs. 200 staff and 250 contractors are facing unemployment. Ludicrously, Exxon have suggested they could support workers to get a job at their other site, 500 miles away in Southampton. We all knew this was coming. For years, the Scottish Greens called on the government to develop a just transition plan for Mossmorran. And in April of 2024, the government agreed, promising that work would commence within months. That was 18 months ago. So on behalf of the workers and their families who thought the Scottish Government had their back,
let's hear Mr Greer.
Can I ask the First Minister, where is that transition plan?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, the work the Government is undertaking, as set out by the Deputy First Minister on Tuesday, is focused on learning from the experience that we are taking forward in Grangemouth, of the business ventures and developments that can come forward, supported by Scottish Enterprise, to enable us to assist companies and individuals to meet the just transition. That is the work that the Government is taking forward as a consequence of the very damaging decision that was taken on Tuesday, and we will support that activity with the assistance and the intervention that the Government has set out.
Ross Greer.
Presiding Officer, I think it's quite clear from that answer. The reality is there is no plan, and this Scottish Government broke its promise to the workers at Mossmorran. The Government made a commitment to the workers and their community, and it's quite clear that they've done nothing to fulfil it. The Scottish Greens have pushed for that just transition plan for years. In 2022, Fife's Green MSP Mark Ruskell published plans that he developed. He's held summits bringing together workers, their unions and the wider community, and he pushed government ministers to make that commitment in the spring of last year. But we've heard nothing since, not even in the climate plan published earlier this month, despite Mossmorran being responsible for 10% of all of Scotland's emissions. Can the First Minister name a single thing the government has done specifically for the workers at Mossmorran since announcing that they would develop a just transition plan for them 18 months ago? First Minister.
Well, the Government has taken forward a number of steps in relation to the work that has emerged from Grangemouth, which is identifying low-carbon solutions and economic opportunities for Scotland. That is what the Government has done. And there are a range of business opportunities and projects that have been developed by Scottish Enterprise that are designed to address the need to provide sustained employment in the Mossmorran area. So those ideas and those arguments are central to the propositions that we can take forward. They are part of the Government's transition to net zero and to a just transition, but they also happen within the context of the damage that is being done to this whole process by the perpetuation of the Energy Profits Levy, which is quite clearly damaging and which has been ascribed by the Mossmorran leadership as contributing towards the damaging to employment that has been experienced at Mossmorran.
Question number 4, Claire Haughey.
To ask the First Minister, in light of the UK Government's reported decision to revisit compensating women against state pension inequality, what assessment the Scottish Government has made of the potential social security implications for those affected in Scotland?
First Minister.
President Officer, we welcome the UK Government's long overdue announcement to reconsider the decision on compensation for women born in the 1950s impacted by the maladministration of the changes to state pension age. Around 336,000 women in Scotland were impacted, and the Parliamentary and Health Service Ombudsman recommended they should receive compensation of up to £2,950 each. The Scottish Government has and always will support the WASPI campaign, and I urge the UK Government to finally do the right thing and compensate the women affected now.
Claire Haughey.
It's welcome the Labour UK Government has been forced into this latest U-turn, and it's now vital that they stop dragging their feet. WASPI women have waited long enough, with many having died while waiting for justice. Can the First Minister provide any update on the Scottish Government's latest engagement with the UK Government on steps being taken to set this injustice right? And will he join me in calling on Labour to immediately honour the recommendations of the Parliamentary and Health Service Ombudsman and deliver full compensation for WASPI women now?
First Minister.
I echo that call from Claire Haughey and support it. The Cabinet Secretary for Social Justice wrote to the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions the day after his announcement, asking for the earliest clarification on when exactly UK ministers were first made aware of this new evidence, and urged him to complete this review at pace. She further reiterated that the Scottish Government has always supported the WASPI campaign and that compensation must be delivered now to right this historic wrong.
Thank you. Question number 6, Douglas Ross.
To ask the First Minister what action the Scottish Government will take in response to reported figures from the road safety charity Break, which show that over the last year, road deaths and serious injuries rose by 2.8% nationally, with Murray recording the highest increase, with a rise of 83%.
First Minister.
President Officer, any death or serious injury on our roads is a tragedy, and I offer my sympathies to everyone affected by the loss of a loved one. The Scottish Government is acting to take forward measures on road safety, including the support of £48 million of road safety investment this year, a 33% increase on last year, supporting engineering improvements, education and enforcement nationwide. I recognise that there is more work that has to be done, and the Government will continue working with partners to reduce harm and keep communities safe.
Douglas Ross.
This is Road Safety Week, but these figures confirm that Scotland's roads are getting more dangerous. More people are dying or being seriously injured on Scotland's roads. And the figures for Murray are shocking and devastating. In the last year, 43 people have either been killed or seriously injured on our roads. Far too many families are grieving the loss of loved ones. The main road through Murray is the A96, which the SNP promised to dual years ago. They have launched countless consultations but have failed to dual a single mile of that road. So will the First Minister say if it is still the SNP policy to fully dual the A96 from Aberdeen to Inverness? And if it is, will he tell us when?
First Minister.
President Officer, that remains the policy position of the Scottish Government. And in relation to the question on road casualties, in my initial answer I acknowledged the significance and the seriousness of road casualties, and the data in Murray has increased significantly, as I acknowledge. But the wider pattern is that in 2024, the number of casualties as a result of road traffic accident was the 5th lowest on record and the 3rd lowest outside of the pandemic years. And there has been, compared to the baseline of 2014 to 2018, a reduction in road deaths, a reduction in serious injuries, a reduction in child fatalities and a reduction in child serious injuries. But I acknowledge there is more that has to be done, and the Government is taking forward that work.
Neil Bibby.
8 months ago, I raised the issue of rising road casualties in Renfrewshire, and I asked the First Minister why the Scottish Government have delayed introducing speed awareness courses in Scotland, despite promising to first look into it 16 years ago. In his answer, the First Minister said he would write to me to outline what steps the Scottish Government would be prepared to take. I'm still waiting for the letter, and more importantly, we're still waiting for these speed awareness courses. Isn't this another case of the First Minister, when the First Minister is found wanting, he gives us warm words, promises action and then does nothing? When will these courses be introduced in Scotland like they are in England and Wales?
First Minister.
I'll look into the point about a reply to Mr Bibby. If I promised a reply and it's not forthcoming, I apologise to him for that, and I'll look into that immediately after the First Minister's questions. In relation to measures, as I set out in my answer to Mr Ross, the Government has increased the funding available for road safety activity in Scotland by 33%. And Road Safety Scotland has been undertaking a range of national behaviour change campaigns in 2025-26 relating to motorbikes, speed, drink and drug driving, fitness to drive, distractions and young drivers. And Police Scotland and partners have been undertaking road safety activities including the Fatal 5 campaign, Motorcycle Safety campaign, Two Wheels campaign, Operation Spotlight and the Drug Driving Week. So there are a whole range of different measures being taken to improve road safety, but I will look into the specific issue that Mr Bibby has set out for me and take forward the necessary response.
I now call question number 6, Carol Mockin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what the Scottish Government's response is to the news that public satisfaction with the NHS has dropped to its lowest level in more than a decade, according to the Scottish Household Survey.
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, the Government is responding to that information by maintaining its focus on improving the delivery of the National Health Service. We've seen waits, particularly the longest waits, reduce for 4 months in a row. There is more to be done, and the Government is making the necessary investment in reducing those waiting times, and we are beginning to see the effect of that in the data that's available to us now.
Carol Mockin.
I thank the First Minister for that answer. When the First Minister's party first took office in 2007, following 8 years of Labour-led governments, 83% of Scots were satisfied with the NHS. That figure is now just 61%. Does the First Minister agree with me? A failure to show leadership and very poor decision-making has led us to this situation. And given the SNP have been in power for almost 2 decades, almost 20 years, how does he plan to convince the Scottish public that the SNP should be in charge of our most valued public asset, the NHS, for another 5 years?
First Minister.
Carol Mockin has just asked me a question which has made absolutely no reference to the impact of the pandemic. And the pandemic resulted in essentially a period of almost 2 years in which scheduled care had to be paused to enable us to sustain the National Health Service during a global pandemic. Now, her party leader has just asked me about COVID, and Carol Mockin has asked me a question about performance of the NHS, which takes no account of COVID. Now, what we're going to do is what I'm intensely focused on doing, which is making sure that we improve the recovery of the National Health Service. And what is happening in that respect? Well, what we're seeing is that the number of hip and knee operations reached an all-time high in 2024, which is really welcome. In the 12 months to September 2025, there was an increase in the number of operations performed compared to the previous year. And in September 2025, compared to September 2024, the number of operations performed was nearly 14% higher than it was in the previous year. So what we are going to do is exactly what I am focused on, what the Health Secretary is focused on, is delivering for the people of Scotland, which is what this government always does.
Evan Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm sure that Carol Mockin will recognise that in Labour-controlled NHS England, levels of dissatisfaction are currently at their highest since the British Social Attitude Survey began. And that's 4 decades since that came into being. While the NHS in Labour-run Wales has the lowest satisfaction rate in the whole of the UK. Does the First Minister therefore agree with me that Scottish Labour need only look at their own colleagues' records in the NHS to know that those in glass houses should not throw stones? And will he reaffirm his commitment to ensuring that this SNP government will continue to tackle the longest waits, increase access to care and improve delivery of Scotland's NHS as a matter of priority?
I would remind members that concise questions enable more members to take part, and I would also remind members that a focus on devolved responsibilities would be helpful. First Minister.
Presiding Officer, in Scotland there are more staff working in our National Health Service now than when this government took office. There are more midwives, more nurses, more dental consultants, and GP numbers are going up. 97% of discharges from Scottish hospitals happen without delay. More patients are being seen and treated in shorter periods. There were 23,181 operations performed in September 2025, 13.7% higher than in September 2024. The number of hip and knee operations reached an all-time high in 2024. That is delivery, and that's what people get from an SNP government.
Thank you. We move to constituency and general supplementaries. The more concise members are, the more questions we will be able to put. I call Miles Briggs.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And back in Scotland, people living with chronic pain have been expressing concern that the Scottish National Residential Pain Management Programme, based in Glasgow, which provides intense support to people from all over Scotland who live with chronic pain, will no longer be directly funded by the Scottish Government. The Scottish Parliament voted to create this national service, and since 2015, the Pain Management Programme has been free to all boards to refer patients to help people living with chronic pain to self-manage. So can I ask the First Minister, will he investigate why this decision has been taken and why boards will now be forced to pay to refer patients to this service? And will this be actually now a national service for people living with chronic pain wherever they live in Scotland?
First Minister.
Well, it's vital these services are available, but fundamentally we have got to take decisions about the sustainability of services as they relate to individual parts of the country where demand for services lie. I'll look at the details of what Miles Briggs has raised with me, but obviously the Government is focused on making sure we have sustainable public services in place, and that includes the National Health Service.
Annabel Ewing.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The announcement this week that Miss Moran is to close by February of next year comes as devastating news to the hundreds of workers and contractors at the site. And ExxonMobil were very clear on Tuesday that the UK Labour Government's damaging and uncompetitive economic and fiscal policies led to this decision. Can the First Minister outline in a bit more detail what action the Scottish Government is taking to work to secure a future for the site? And does he share my utter disbelief and anger that whilst the UK Labour Government can somehow find hundreds of millions of pounds to save steel production in Scunthorpe, a £600 million loan guarantee for a petrochemical plant in Belgium and a change in the regulatory regime to help the car industry in England, it cannot even find one penny for Ms Moran? Surely, First Minister, the only conclusion to draw here is that when push comes to shove, Scotland simply does not matter enough to the UK Labour Government.
Thank you.
Presiding Officer, I do share the concern that Annabel Ewing has expressed to Parliament about the lack of intervention from the United Kingdom Government when it's able to intervene in other situations in other parts of the United Kingdom, and also the comments that Annabel Ewing puts on the record from ExxonMobil about what has led to this decision of the unsympathetic and unhelpful actions of the United Kingdom Government. The Scottish Government will do the following things. We will take forward direct support to the workforce who are affected through the Partnership Action on Continuing Employment. We will also take forward measures arising out of the work that we are doing in Grangemouth on finding alternative opportunities for industrial sites, and that work was shared with Parliament on Tuesday by the Deputy First Minister. And we will continue our engagement with the company and with the trade unions to identify approaches that will help to support the workforce, Ms Ewing's constituents, as the constituency member, who are severely affected by the announcement that has been made, and the Scottish Government will do all that we can within our powers to support those affected.
Claire Baker.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The amount of questions we've had this afternoon on Miss Moran shows the significance and the concern about the seriousness of the situation. The First Minister talks about lack of intervention. Can I ask if the Scottish Government were aware of a report in the Financial Times in September that ExxonMobil were at that point looking to sell the site, and what response and engagement did the Scottish Government have with ExxonMobil given that report?
First Minister.
The Scottish Government engaged when it was apparent that ExxonMobil were marketing the site, but the announcement that was made this week was an announcement the Government did not expect to be happening in such a short timescale. But we will, of course, sustain our engagement with the company as a consequence.
Alexander Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, mindless vandalism and antisocial behaviour on stagecoach buses in my region is now at a crisis point. These mindless acts endanger lives, damage vital transport services and cause significant disruption for the communities who rely upon them. So what action will the Scottish Government take to protect drivers, protect passengers and the wider communities?
First Minister.
Obviously, any acts of violence are completely unacceptable in our society, and individuals should not be perpetuating these attacks. There are obviously measures that the Transport Secretary is exploring around whether there are any circumstances in which there is a reason or a justification for restricting access to public transport concessionary travel as a consequence of any behaviour. But obviously policing in our communities is an essential part of this endeavour. But fundamentally it is about how individuals behave, and any act of violence is unacceptable in our society.
Fulton McGregor.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. People across Scotland were able to watch the national team's historic and quite amazing victory on Tuesday on free-to-air television. A successful campaign by many of us in the SNP and indeed across the political spectrum. As the current arrangement comes to an end, people risk being shut out of future successes and nights like that one. Will the First Minister therefore put his weight behind the campaign to keep Scotland's international matches games free to air, and will he raise this matter with the UK Government, broadcasters and football authorities to ensure that all future No Scotland, No Party matches are available to everyone on terrestrial television?
First Minister.
I do agree with the point that Fulton McGregor makes to me, Presiding Officer, and I recognise the importance of there being free-to-air television access for matches of this nature. I will be happy to ensure that ministers support Mr McGregor and take forward those representations. The Scottish Government has long called for national sporting events like men's and women's football qualifiers to be protected for free-to-air broadcast, and will continue to make that case on behalf of fans across the country, because it's a matter of enormous significance that all of us were able to experience the joyful scenes at Hampden on Tuesday evening, and that should be free for members of the public to be able to see those events.
Michael Mara.
I'm sure the First Minister will share what is my utter dismay at the Auditor-General's report published today on the unacceptable lack of progress on reform of NHS Tayside mental health services. The First Minister knows I've raised this issue with him on numerous occasions, but from the two-strang reviews to the Ministerial Oversight Group, nothing seems to be able to force the real change, with the leadership of NHS Tayside waiting until attention is elsewhere, scaling back the process and returning to business as usual. When digesting the report, can I ask, will the First Minister give urgent consideration to appointing external leadership to finally deliver the real change that is required?
Minister.
I am very sympathetic to the point that Mr Mara puts to me. I obviously have constituents who are affected by exactly the same issue that he puts to me, so I understand its significance. There has been a whole range of external scrutiny that's been undertaken, and that should be enough, frankly, for it to all happen. So what I would assure Mr Mara about is that officials met the new Chief Executive and leadership team earlier this year to understand how they were responding to the challenges, and NHS Tayside is committed to addressing these by December 2025, with many plans already in place, including the adoption of a unified strategic approach in relation to the delivery of the service, consistent with the enhanced monitoring and scrutiny executive group. Now, the next 3 months will be critical in that endeavour. So what I will undertake to Mr Mara is that I will review this issue in January, once I see the conclusions of the work that has been committed to by NHS Tayside, and then address the point that he raises with me, because we need to expect the leadership of health boards to get on with meeting the challenges they've got to face. So I'm not dismissing Mr Mara's suggestion, but I will return to it once I see what progress has been made by December.
Edward Mountain.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, community councils and communities across the Highlands are being swamped with planning applications for pylons, battery storage sites, switching stations and now workers' villages. Some of these applications extend to thousands of pages, but they only have 30 days to respond to the Energy Consents Unit on each application. Given the complexity of these projects, would the First Minister agree with me that it would be more democratic to extend the 30-day period to allow Highland communities to be fully consulted and respond?
First Minister.
Sir, I think there's an important point underlying Mr Mountain's question, which is that communities must have adequate and appropriate opportunities to be involved in decision-making in this respect. And I would hope that that can be undertaken within the timescales that are available, but I will consider the specific point that he has made about the appropriateness of that timescale and write to him in due course as to whether there is any flexibility that can be applied. I cannot quite recall the status of the 30-day period, but I will check that point and come back to him.
John Mason.
Thank you. Given the report by the Abortion Law Expert Group that came out last Friday with its emphasis on healthcare, can the First Minister give an assurance that the health of all unborn babies, wanted or not, will be at the centre of the Government's thinking?
First Minister.
Sir, I recognise this is a very sensitive issue, and the Government was committed in 23-24 to undertake a review of the legislation around abortion. The recommendations included within the report are those of the expert group, and the Government fulfilled its commitment to publish those recommendations. We will, of course, be giving consideration to these issues, but that will have to involve extensive engagement with a very broad range of stakeholders, and the legitimate points that Mr Mason raises will have to be central to the analysis of this issue, along with a whole range of other issues that will have to be considered in any future actions that the Government may decide to take at some stage in the future.
Willie Rennie.
The Education Secretary has announced a brand new plan to deliver the SNP promise on reducing teacher contact time. Can the First Minister tell us what's new about this plan? And I assume there was engagement and consultation with the councils and unions, so I assume that the strikes at the end of January are now off. And when, therefore, will the actual plan be implemented?
First Minister.
So the announcements made by the Education Secretary set out the Government's commitments in this way and the progress that needs to be made. I answered a question from Mr Cole-Hamilton, I think it was last week or the week before, which was setting out it was actually last week, because I then went to the COSLA conference in St Andrews in Mr Rennie's constituency and set out the Government's expectation that progress is to be made on class contact time. So I hope the proposals from the Education Secretary will help to advance the timescale for implementing those changes, because the last thing I want to see is any industrial action within Scottish education.
Bill Kidd.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. With regards to the UK Government's asylum proposals, the assessment of the Scottish Refugee Council, who are exhibiting in Parliament this week, is that these proposals risk pushing the national conversation into dangerous territory by mirroring the language and tone of the far right. Does the First Minister agree with that assessment, which I believe will be shared by constituents across Scotland?
First Minister.
President Officer, I share the concerns that Mr Kidd has set out to Parliament. I think the proposals that have been set out run the risk of undermining the cohesion of our communities and of pushing more people, including families with children, into poverty and destitution, increasing homelessness and leaving local authorities to pick up the pieces. We need to have a sensitive approach to the whole question of asylum and immigration. Scotland is a welcoming country, and I want to make sure that continues to be the case in the future.
Thank you. I call Douglas Ross for a point of order.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. In April 2024, Mary McCallan announced that there would be a just transition plan for Miss Moran developed by the Scottish Government. Russell Finlay and others have asked the First Minister about that plan today, and he refused to give any answers. The Ministerial Code says that ministers must be open and transparent with public and this Parliament. Therefore, Presiding Officer, would it be a breach of the Ministerial Code and potentially the standing orders of this Parliament if the First Minister is aware where that plan is but has refused to tell Parliament, or is aware that that development of the plan was never progressed and has also not told Parliament that?
Thank you. As members are aware, the content of a member's contribution is not ordinarily a matter for the Chair to comment on, but as a matter of courtesy and respect, of course, I would expect all members always to strive to be accurate in their contributions. The member will be aware of mechanisms that do exist where the record should be corrected, and also of the considerations that are matters for the Ministerial Code. That concludes First Minister's questions. The next item of business is a member's business debate in the name of Claire Adamson. There will now be a short suspension to allow those in the chamber and in the public gallery who wish to leave to do so.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Lewis McGlynn.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Saoirse Healy.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Donald C. Stewart. Broadcasting Scotland is Scotland's independent broadcaster, providing factual news, reporting on the issues important to the people of Scotland.
We are committed to public service broadcasting, and with your support, we will produce even more programmes.
Provide opportunities for young people interested in media production and broadcasting, and challenge preconceptions of what Scottish media looks like, amplifying Scotland's voice and reflecting its communities.
We can already deliver high-quality live news, and we will create the highest quality programmes for you to enjoy. But we can only do that with your support.
So please subscribe to and share our channel or donate to Broadcasting Scotland via the link in the description. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.